The heavy oak doors of the courtroom creaked open, and a hushed silence fell over the crowd. Every head turned toward the entrance as three young adults walked in, identical in height, posture, and piercing determination in their eyes. The triplets moved in perfect sync, like soldiers marching to a battlefield. Their presence was commanding, yet their faces bore a trace of fear hidden behind steely resolve. It wasn't every day that the children of a struggling single mother stood before the highest court in the state. But this was no ordinary case, and these were no ordinary children. They were here for one reason: to defend the woman who had given them life, sacrificed everything for them, and now stood accused of a crime she didn't commit. At the center of the courtroom sat their mother, her frail figure dwarfed by the grand wooden chair. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the edge of the table, but when her eyes met her children's, they softened with pride and love. She had always told them to be strong, to hold their heads high no matter what the world threw at them. And today, they were living proof of her lessons. The eldest of the triplets, Ethan, stepped forward first. He was the calm leader, the one who always kept the family together through storms. His jaw tightened as he scanned the room, taking in the faces of lawyers, journalists, and curious onlookers. He could feel their judgment, whispers about their mother, questions about their upbringing, but he ignored them. Today, the truth would speak louder than rumors. Beside him stood Emily, the heart of the trio. Her fiery spirit burned in her eyes as she clutched a folder full of evidence they had spent sleepless nights gathering. She had promised herself she would not cry in court, not here, not now. Their mother needed strength, not tears. And then there was Evan, the youngest by 2 minutes, but the boldest. His confidence bordered on defiance, and he wore it like armor. As they walked to their seats, he glanced at the prosecution's table, his expression daring them to underestimate his family. The judge had not yet entered, but the triplets could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them. This was bigger than any school debate, bigger than any personal battle. Their mother's freedom, and her dignity, was at stake. Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Those are the kids. Triplets. Cameras clicked like restless insects, capturing every second of the unfolding drama. When they finally sat down behind their mother, they reached out and held her hands, one on each side, silently promising her the fight wasn't over. No matter how powerful the people on the other side were, no matter what secrets this courtroom held, they were ready. They had no idea that the biggest secret of all was about to come from the man who would soon take the judge's seat. The wooden gavel struck the bench with a sharp crack, echoing through the courtroom like a warning bell. "All rise," the bailiff announced, his voice carrying authority. Chairs scraped against the marble floor as everyone stood. And then, the man who held their mother's fate in his hands entered, the judge. Dressed in a perfectly tailored black robe, his silver hair gleamed under the bright lights, and his face carried the kind of sternness that came from decades of commanding respect. He was known as Judge Alexander Cole, one of the most influential and wealthiest men in the state, a billionaire judge whose decisions could shape lives, crush empires, or build legacies. The triplets rose along with the rest, their hearts pounding in unison. They had read about him, seen him on television, and heard the rumors. Some said he had no mercy. Others claimed his judgments were legendary for their fairness. But none of that mattered right now. What mattered was their mother, and the desperate hope that truth could stand against power. As the judge settled into his seat, his piercing eyes scanned the room with an almost predatory calm. For a brief moment, his gaze lingered on the triplets. Something flickered across his face, something no one else noticed. The defense attorney, a nervous young man clutching his notes like a lifeline, cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my clients, Ethan, Emily, and Evan Carter, are here today not only as witnesses but as the sole defenders of their mother, Linda Carter, who has been wrongfully accused of fraud and embezzlement." The prosecutor, a slick man in an expensive suit, smirked. "Your Honor, while I respect their loyalty, this case is built on facts, not family sentiment." His tone dripped with arrogance, and the triplets exchanged quick glances of silent determination. Then Ethan stood. He didn't wait for permission. He just did it, heart pounding, voice steady. "Your Honor, my mother is innocent. We can prove it." The courtroom gasped. No one interrupted judges in this court. Not unless they were ready to risk contempt. But Judge Cole didn't strike the gavel. Instead, he raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Emily joined in, her voice trembling at first but gaining strength with every word. She worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. She never stole a cent. The real criminals are sitting right over there, she said, pointing at the smug corporate representatives in the gallery. Evan leaned forward, bold as ever. We have evidence. Bank records, emails, everything they thought they could hide. And we'll show it right here. For a moment, silence reigned. Then Judge Cole spoke, his voice deep and controlled. Interesting. Very well. Present what you have. As they opened the folder filled with proof, none of them knew that the man who just gave them permission was about to discover a truth that would shake the very foundation of his world. Judge Alexander Cole leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on the 3 young people standing before him. The triplets. There was something unusual about them, something that tugged at the corners of his memory like a ghost from the past. Their determination reminded him of someone he once knew, long ago. As the defense attorney scrambled to arrange the evidence, the judge's thoughts wandered, just for a second. He wasn't just a judge, he was a man who had built an empire. From real estate to finance, his wealth rivaled the richest in the country. People feared him, respected him, envied him. But none of that mattered here. In his courtroom, justice was his only allegiance, or at least, that's what he told himself. He studied the triplets more closely. The boy who spoke first, Ethan, had a commanding presence, calm yet fierce. Emily, with her fiery eyes, had the same stubborn spark as her. And Evan, bold and defiant, reminded him of a younger version of himself. For the briefest moment, his heart stuttered. Why do they look so familiar? Proceed, he said, masking the sudden rush of unease with a voice of cold authority. Ethan stepped forward, placing a stack of papers on the podium. Your Honor, these are the original bank statements proving that the transactions were falsified by the company executives, not my mother. Emily opened her folder and held up printed emails, her voice firm. These messages show threats against her when she refused to sign illegal documents. Evan leaned in, his tone sharp. They framed her because she stood up to them. And they thought she'd have no one to fight back. They were wrong. The prosecutor objected, but Judge Cole silenced him with a single glare that could freeze fire. Objection overruled. Let them continue. As the triplets laid out piece after piece of evidence, the judge's gaze kept returning to their faces. Each time, that strange, unsettling feeling grew stronger. Then it hit him like a thunderclap. The eyes, those unmistakable eyes. He had seen them before, decades ago, in the face of a woman who once meant everything to him. Linda Carter. The name echoed in his mind like a whisper from the past. His pulse quickened, but he forced his face to remain impassive. Could it be? Could these 3 standing before him be his? His grip on the gavel tightened, his thoughts spiraling. Years ago, he had made choices that ended a love story before it truly began. He never knew what happened to her after they parted ways. And now, sitting on the bench, staring at these young people risking everything for their mother, he began to wonder if fate had brought him here for a reason. For the first time in decades, the unshakable Judge Alexander Cole felt his world tilting. He needed answers, and he was going to get them, soon. Judge Alexander Cole felt the weight of the courtroom pressing down on him like never before. His mind, usually sharp and focused, was now a storm of questions he couldn't silence. Linda Carter. Those eyes, the dates, the math added up too perfectly to ignore. While the triplets passionately defended their mother, the judge's attention drifted to her. Linda sat quietly, her face pale but strong, her eyes refusing to meet his. Was it shame, anger, or was she hiding the very truth he now suspected? He cleared his throat, trying to regain control of himself in the proceedings. Mrs. Carter, he said, his voice measured. Step forward. Linda rose slowly, her steps heavy with a mixture of dignity and dread. She knew that tone, the tone of a man who wanted answers, not just as a judge, but as someone with unfinished business. When their eyes met, it was as if 20 years collapsed into a single heartbeat. Do you recognize me? His words were low, but the courtroom was so silent that everyone heard. A murmur rippled through the gallery. The prosecutor looked confused, the defense attorney froze. The triplets exchanged startled glances. Linda hesitated, her lips trembling. Finally, she whispered, "Yes, I do." Alexander's jaw clenched. His voice hardened, but his eyes betrayed the turmoil inside. These children, are they mine? The question hung in the air like a lightning bolt. The courtroom erupted in shocked gasps. Cameras flashed wildly. The bailiff shouted for order, but no one could look away. Ethan, Emily, and Evan turned to their mother, eyes wide, demanding answers. "Mom, what is he talking about?" Emily's voice cracked with disbelief. Linda's shoulders sagged under the weight of decades of silence. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yes," she said softly. "He's your father." Time stopped. The triplets stood frozen, the revelation crashing over them like a tidal wave. They had come here to save their mother, and now they had discovered the truth about the man sitting in judgment over her life, the man who had unknowingly abandoned them. Judge Cole's breath caught in his throat. He felt as though the ground beneath him had vanished. He wanted to speak, to explain, to demand why she never told him, but this was not the place. Not now. Yet he could no longer pretend that this was just another case. His gavel struck the bench sharply, regaining order in the room. But his voice, usually cold and detached, now carried something it never had before, emotion. "Court will recess for 1 hour," he announced, rising quickly and leaving through the side door. As he walked away, his thoughts thundered, "They're mine. My children. All these years, and I never knew." Behind him, the triplets stared after the man who had just turned their entire world upside down. The courtroom was silent when Judge Alexander Cole returned after the recess. But the silence was different now, thicker, charged with tension and unanswered questions. Reporters outside were already buzzing with headlines. "Billionaire judge claims defendants are his children." Cameras waited like vultures for the moment the gavel would strike again. Alexander sat down slowly, his face composed, but inside he was anything but calm. He had spent the past hour in a whirlwind, old memories flooding back, guilt clawing at him, and the reality that the 3 young adults standing before him were his own flesh and blood. Children he had never known. Children who had grown up without him. The bailiff called for order, and the room settled. Linda's eyes lifted to meet his again, full of unspoken words. He wanted to ask her 1,000 questions, but all of that had to wait. Right now, he had a duty, both as a judge and as a father. He took a deep breath, his voice firm yet heavy with emotion. "This court has reviewed the evidence presented." He looked toward the prosecutor, whose smug confidence had long since evaporated. "The allegations against Linda Carter are unfounded. The evidence proves that the fraud was orchestrated by the company executives, not this woman." The courtroom erupted in gasps. The triplets clutched each other's hands, relief flooding their faces. Their mother was free. But Alexander wasn't finished. He raised his gavel again and spoke with the authority of a man who had rediscovered his soul. "Therefore, I dismiss all charges against Linda Carter. Furthermore, I am ordering a full investigation into the corporation responsible for this injustice. Justice will be served." The gavel slammed down, sealing her freedom. The crowd broke into murmurs, but for the triplets, time slowed. They turned to their mother, tears glistening in their eyes. Emily hugged Linda so tightly it looked like she would never let go. Ethan and Evan stood protectively beside her, their relief palpable. Then, slowly, they turned toward the man who had just changed everything. Judge Alexander Cole removed his robe, stepping down from the bench, a rare and shocking sight. For once, he wasn't the untouchable judge or the billionaire tycoon. He was just a man, standing before the family he had unknowingly left behind. His voice cracked as he spoke, softly this time. I don't expect forgiveness. But I want to know you. All of you." The triplets exchanged glances, anger, confusion, hope, all swirling together. They had so many questions, so much pain, but also, a strange sense of longing they couldn't deny. Linda watched silently, her heart torn between old wounds and new possibilities. One step. That's all it took. Ethan moved forward, extending his hand. Alexander took it, his eyes glistening. For the first time in decades, the man who had everything realized what he had truly been missing. And in that courtroom, a place of judgment and justice, a broken family began to heal. The man who changed everything wasn't the billionaire judge or the powerful tycoon. It was a father finally finding his children, and children finally finding the truth.